All right, thanks, Dan. A primetime address from President Trump bringing up debunked claims from years ago. We're trying to look ahead to the future election. So why is the 2020 election staying in the headlines? And how are election officials responding today? Election integrity is today's big story. Now, with the midterms just 4 months away, President Trump taking the podium in primetime last night, making what many are calling misleading and unproven claims about the election that he lost 6 years ago. The 25-minute speech included claims from the president that the newly released documents would show efforts by China to interfere in our elections and expose flaws in the voting system.
They're vulnerable and they're easily compromised, and people within our government knew that.
But the president provided no evidence that the outcome or any votes were altered in the 2020 election, and his claims deeply contradict the assessments his own intelligence officials gave him in 2021 that China did not attempt to influence the presidential outcome. Now, Trump lost in 2020 to Joe Biden by 7 million votes. He lost the Electoral College and lost more than 60 court cases challenging the election, some in front of judges that he appointed. Now, there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud, something his own attorney general acknowledged at the time. Now, despite the efforts and the facts here, the efforts continue to prove otherwise. In Fulton County, Georgia, hundreds of FBI agents from across the country have until today to finish reviewing piles of documents related to the 2020 presidential election. That's according to a leaked FBI memo. It's actually part of what the agency is calling a surge in a, quote, priority investigation. The surge comes almost 6 months after federal agents executed a search warrant at the county's election hub, taking more than 600 boxes of ballots and documents from the 2020 election. Local leaders left out of the loop on that federal investigation.
We don't really know what the July 17th deadline is about. It seems arbitrary, but because they put it out there, it feels like they will have to come out with something on the 18th.
Fulton County, Georgia, a major focus of President Trump's unproven claims that the race was rigged and stolen. Several recounts, audits, and investigations have affirmed the results that Biden won both the county and the state. Meanwhile, President Trump also took aim at Michigan's voting system in his speech last night. In response, Governor Gretchen Whitmer released a statement affirming the state's elections are safe and secure. She went on to say, quote, "For decades, our voting systems have been rigorously tested, certified, and subject to strict standards before they are ever used in an election. Election officials here in Michigan work year-round to ensure that every eligible voter can cast a ballot and that only eligible voters do so. Furthermore, the results of the 2020 election have been repeatedly reviewed and consistently upheld as accurate. Conspiracy theories about the 2020 election must come to an end." Meanwhile, the federal government plans to send election monitors to cities including Lansing, East Lansing, and Detroit for Michigan's August 4th primary. That race will determine which Democrat will end up on the November ballot to face Republican Mike Rogers for one of Michigan's Senate seats. It's a must-win for both parties here. Like Governor Whitmer, Lansing's city clerk says he has faith in Michigan's elections.
He talked about the vulnerability, purported vulnerability of our vote counting machines. I can tell you we test those machines before every election, and I've been involved in recounts, retabulations, as well as here in Michigan, we have audits of the results of elections, and we have found that that they are highly accurate.
Right now, Michigan's county, city, and township clerks are conducting mandatory pre-election tests of their machines to ensure they're working properly. It's all before early voting sites open Saturday, July 25th for the state's August primary. The testing is open to the public and must be conducted at least 5 days before early voting starts. Meanwhile, Republicans in Ohio have taken efforts in recent years to enact various election reforms in an effort to make the state's elections more secure. Back in May, we learned Ohio Republicans are placing a ballot initiative about voter ID on the November ballot. If passed, that initiative would enshrine voter ID for voters in Ohio's Constitution. Now, the only thing that could change it in the future is another statewide vote. Now, Republican gubernatorial candidate Vivek Ramaswamy and his running mate, current state Senate President Rob McCauley, say they support the move.
I think the timing is appropriate under the circumstances of really a lot of the national discussion that's happening right now on this.
Now, if voters reject this plan in November, Ohio will still have those voter ID requirements to vote, though future legislatures could overturn that law. Now, back to the president's primetime address here. Some experts say his speech last night was part of his efforts to pass a new sweeping voter ID law. It's called the Save America Act, and it's been stalled in the Senate. Republicans saying they just don't have the votes to get it through. Meanwhile, the Trump administration trying to push ahead on one of President Trump's executive orders that would create new restrictions for mail-in voting. That order directs the federal government to create a state citizenship list and limit mail-in ballots to people on that list. The administration says it's about preserving election integrity, but Democrats have said it's unconstitutional and could risk disenfranchising millions of eligible voters.
The Postal Service will decide, okay, who's approved to send their ballot through the mail. It's just another backdoor way of trying to influence this election.
Who really loses out here is the voters through no fault of their own, that they're getting penalized, that they might potentially not have their ballot transmitted.
And the order has been blocked by 2 federal judges, but the administration has appealed to continue on the litigation. And while it's not clear how the courts are going to handle this, the post office is supposed to get it in place by July 29th. Meanwhile, late last month, the Supreme Court dealing a blow to President Trump's sweeping effort to restrict mail-in voting. The justices upholding a Mississippi law that says ballots postmarked by Election Day but received up to 5 days later would still be counted. Justice Amy Coney Barrett writing, "Nothing in the federal Election Day statutes requires ballots to be received by Election Day. The electorate's choice to make it when voting is complete, not when ballots are received."